deck.
Last time on Panini Z doesn't exist anymore. Hey everybody, DBZ Card Strategy here with another episode of Decked. This was a long promised episode. My apologies for taking so extra long. It's been a pretty crazy road. I'm here to go ahead and talk a little bit about how things, well, basically what's happened since the last time we've had a chance to talk. Well, since then, of course, Panini has left the game completely. That's fine. With the developers picking up the game fully and supporting it, we're going to go ahead and see, like we said, the launch of a bunch of what I would call legacy characters. Basically, there were characters who needed a new level to them to help balance them out and make them more viable in a competitive environment. That's, of course, Android 16, 17, 18, which, like we said, weren't seeing a whole lot of play, which is pretty good to see. And then, of course, the introduction of the new personalities, King Kai, Pikkon, and Future Gohan. All of them addressing issues in the meta. In our humble opinion from a little bit of playtesting fairly recently, we came to the conclusion that Gohan was meant to kill everything from Vengeance and from Forward. We found that his powers of canceling out other characters' powers don't have as detrimental effect on previous MPs, but on MPs and Forward, from Vengeance and Forward, we find that it cripples them. Most decks basically fall apart at that point. So basically it was meant to kill all the Brolys, the Gokus, and so on that had dominated the game for so long. Kind of interesting. I like it that it exists. It helps to check those kinds of decks and makes people change up their strategies. Also, Pikkon is kind of an interesting character in this one. Like I said, he used to be in the Score Z, for those of you who don't know, would have been able to use Namekian style. For whatever reason, the folks from Score had decided to give him that a characteristic. I enjoyed it. It was fun for what it was back in the day, but I fully understand the Fan Z guys not wanting to allow him to take advantage of Namekian style. It opens up a lot of problems and a lot of can of worms, so I don't blame him to stay away from it. But he just has Namekian-like statistics. If you look at all of his abilities, a lot of rejuvenation focused items, so kind of neat. So like we said, since that's happened, last time we had a chance to talk like this, I remember we weren't even 100% certain on the fate of the game. We weren't certain if this was ever going to happen. So in a couple of days from the time that you see this, the game is going to be, the virtual set 8 Celestial Games will be ready to rock. And that brings us actually to why we're here, what we're talking about. You see, a lot of folks are concerned about how exactly to make use of a virtual card set. Well, you think, I could import it into Octagon, but what good does that do me if I don't play Octagon? I don't go down to my local shop and play, Octagon with the guys, which is kind of frustrating. You're like, hey, what if that's the only way I got to play? What if I don't have a local play group? It's frustrating as all get out. But like we said, if you wanted to find a way to be able to get into this game again, starting with set 8 and forward, let me help you out a little bit. So, however, I should make a couple of provisos here at the beginning. Remember that I don't entirely know how they're going to release this set. If it was like a set that was already pre-placed on sheets of paper, ready to be anticipated to be printed out and printed on sheets and cut out, then that'll be awesome. Then you don't need me. It'll just work. You just plug it into a printer, print it out, run off your sheets. Awesome sauce. Let's get on with the games. But if that's not the case, if they release it in such a way that you simply get like a zip file with all the cards on it as individual JPEG files, then you got a bit of a problem. If you attempt to print them, they'll probably print too large. It's hard to get them the way that you want. And what if you want whole play sets? You don't want to keep running off sheet after sheet after sheet of paper with just one card on each. So, to be perfectly honest, we're probably going to end up having to print off cards onto standard paper, regular printer paper. We have a reason for this. I know a lot of folks are tempted to want to put it on cardstock. Now, there is a pro and con. The pro is, it feels more like a real card, which is awesome. We all want to get back to that if we could. The con is that if you try to put a piece of cardstock that is the exact same thickness as this paper, as your standard cardstock, you'll find that it has actually a different physical feeling. Like it will feel different in a card sleeve. I'm not saying anyone's trying to cheat with that or any would intentionally try to cheat with that, but it creates an obvious stark comparison between actual game cards that came from Panini versus the one we print ourselves. So that's why we've always strayed far away from printing on cardstock. How we proxied before is we would take a standard throwaway card like an extra ally or MPs you just don't need, and then we would slip it into a sleeve, and then we would go ahead and place in front of it, like we said again, on standard printer paper, and proxy it that way. So, cut it to size 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches and slide the proxy card in front of it. Like we said, there's no way to tell the difference between the two cards. They are, like we said, in terms of weight and thickness, identical to a regular standard card. So that's how we keep the game honest. That's worked pretty well so far. We've been proxying. Like we said, that's the sleeve plus Ally MP or other card plus printed card. Like we said, the biggest problem is we don't know what we're going to be getting in terms of how are they giving it to us. I would say probably just for easing them in their own lives, their own work, the developers, they probably are going to send it out to us in the form of, like I said, a zip file full of tons and tons and tons of JPEGs, all numbered to the cards, which is how I would do it. I'd be like, hey, for, greatest variety, let you, the audience, figure that out. So if they are single images, I'm going to go ahead and walk you guys through how does one do that. There's going to be only one thing I'm going to assume in this whole process is that you have some kind of image manipulation software. Now, mind you, that's not too limiting these days. You might have Photoshop, you might not. If you have other softwares like good old, I want to say Illustrator is another one that you can use. You can definitely use that to do this process. So just going to go ahead and open up Photoshop. By the way, I'm going to be screenshotting all this as we go, so you guys can go ahead and see what I'm doing as we go. So the first thing is you're going to go ahead and open up a new file, and then if you have a preset custom, just set it to letter. And you know what? Between me and you, it starts out as 300. If you set it to 600, they're going to print a little sharper. And like I said, that's probably going to be a setting that you're going to have in a lot of different softwares. My apologies, the system's running a little slowly. So you're going to end up with a blank document that's going to be a representation of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Now, like we said, I'm doing that as a sort of a starting point, just so you guys get that we start with the basics. So at the top of your screen, you're going to have where it says View, and you should probably turn on Rulers. And the reason you're going to want to turn on rulers is because you're going to do a mild bit of printing, graphic design type work, and you've got to be able to know your distances and your sizes, because this is going to have what you would call a real world component. Kind of a big deal. Okay, so what you guys are going to do is once you have the rulers appearing at the edge, go ahead and click on the rulers. We can start with the left or the right. Just for what we're doing, I'm starting on the left. Oops, get a picture of that. Okay. Admittedly, this would have been a little easier with what I would call capture software. My apologies. So then you would, like we said, drag it from the left, and you might have to zoom in a little bit. You can use either on the left-hand side, on your toolbar, the magnifying glass, or you can just hold Control plus sign to go ahead and zoom in. And then you're going to want to go ahead and drag that ruler. Like we said, it'll just appear as you pull and drag from the ruler area. Drag it to 1/8 of an inch away from the corner. And the reason you're going to do that is because you can specify a certain amount of space from the edge of the paper. You see, a lot of printers don't print to the edge, so it means that space is naturally not printed to. So now we're just accounting for it so that you don't get your images cut off or gasp resized. I have been humbled a few times where things I've tried to print very, very small or big because I didn't get to account for that proper edge space. And like we said, we tend to settle for that 1/8 of an inch type space. I guess it's more up to you with this sort of operation. And like we said, there'll be pictures to go for each step in the process. Okay, once you've set the 1/8 of an inch on the upper left and top, left edge and right and then top, pardon me, the left side and the top, once you've set those, that's really all you need for setting the corners. We're not going to really use or need any others so for edges, so don't worry, you don't have to keep setting up all the corners. I guess you could if you wanted to, if you're the kind of guy who wants to do that. Okay, this is where things get a little more creative. Then you're going to go ahead and grab again from the left edge, and you're going to go ahead and slide it across, and you're going to go ahead and put it 2.5 inches, 2.5 inches from the left edge. But here's the thing. You have to, add an 1/8 of an inch. So if you guys want to do this in a crude way, basically just count 1 inch from where the left ruler starts. The reason being, if you have to account for that small amount of edge space that we've already sectioned off for that non-printable area. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, and that's going to go ahead and show up on your screen now. And then what will happen is you're going to go ahead and do something very similar below it. Rather above it. You're going to grab from the ruler space at the top, and you're going to go ahead and do remember like we said, an average card is 2.5 by 3.5 inches. So you're going to go ahead and move 3.5 inches from the top. Okay, and then that ought to appear on your screen now. And what we said about this is just that this sort of method is, like we said, how you build your first square. Now, you don't necessarily need to do the step I'm about to do. You're going to go ahead and select the box tool, the marquee tool is actually what it's called, rectangular marquee tool. That's just the one that lets you specify a space. It lets you specify the shape of this rectangle. And if you have it set to snap, it'll just automatically snap to the size of the rulers, the shape of the rulers we're making around it. What that's of any use for is you're now going to define the space that you're going to use to create a paint fill. Okay, right hand side, go ahead and make a new layer. The reason being, you're going to want all this on a layer up from where you've been working. Do not worry, the rulers will follow. With the space that you've made, go ahead and start doing a fill and make a rectangle. I just go with red just because it contrasts real well, so I can tell where I put it. Okay, go ahead and deselect that one now. So here's the clincher. Here's the part where I spent a little bit of time sort of scratching my head, not because it was particularly difficult or anything, or there aren't tutorials out there, but it was more like, how would I do this one? And I have the mind such that I get hung up on the logic parts of things just because I want to be certain. I could just follow the rules and steps, but for me, I want to walk it through. Okay, so with Photoshop or any other similar program you might be working with, if you select the rectangle that you made with the marquee tool and then the paint bucket fill, you're going to want to hold Alt and drag it to the right. And then make sure it lines up with the top, bottom, and left-hand side. And then go ahead and actually do this again. Well, actually, hold on, I skipped a step. You're going to want to go ahead and now that you have you have another edge to define. On the left-hand side, go ahead and grab another ruler. From the left-hand side, like we say, you click in the ruler space, drag it out, and make a line that passes on the right-hand side of this square. What that's for is to go ahead and define a new edge to orient the squares from. It's kind of important. If you do this all correctly, this first row of 3, where everything's equidistant from each other, they perfectly sit on each other's edge, you will not have any troubles in the next step. So if you take a look, you're going to see 3 squares, again, 1/8 of an inch from the top and left, and then, like we said, right on the money from each other, which is actually kind of awesome. Because, dig this, if you go ahead and highlight all 3 of those boxes at once and select all 3 of them, you'll have them all selected, and then that trick we just used of holding Alt and dragging will apply again, and you can just go ahead and pull them down one layer below. You remember how we had to add that extra ruler line for when we went to the right? We do the same thing. We add one more like this to this edge, and voila, we've built a grid of 3.5 by 2.5 squares. Now, I'm going to go ahead and stop that right there because I just don't want to, keep repeating for you guys and showing you each and every step, because you can carry that out. It's just basically repeat those steps. Here's where it gets interesting, because those of you who have attempted to print out your own cards probably came across this problem. Now, I've skipped a step. What I did, of course, is I located a card on the internet. I just picked a random card. I picked Devastating Blow. So go to File, Place, and then you get to search for a card. Now, place, all that means is, like we said, the software you're using is probably going to have an equivalent to that, where it's like insert or place, an image. Mine, I just threw it on the desktop just so you guys could see it. It's obviously Devastating Blow. That is both a card and a funny thing to say. All right, so I picked Devastating Blow, place it into play. It becomes, place it into play, wow. Using language from the game in the tutorial, nice. So now that I've put it into play, I keep saying that, onto our sheet of paper, can anyone see that tiny little dot that is Devastating Blow appearing at the bottom? Or appearing there towards the middle? No, you'd have a hard time doing that. By the way, you have to press Enter to commit to placing that item. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag it into the space where I want to use it. And you guys are going to notice, you're like, wait a minute, this thing's only a couple of pixels across. What do I do with it? Well, This is where the magic of Photoshop and the fact that you and I have already done all that work already of creating this grid. Okay, go ahead and select it so that it gets the little handles on it, and then go to a corner where that little symbol starts to appear. Let's see, that little symbol, the diagonal arrow, is just going to tell you, when you put your pointer, when you put your cursor at the end there, it's going to let you know you can drag it. So here's something important: hold Shift as you drag it to size, because it will keep it from like distorting. Like you'll notice if you just pull from the top, it'll distort and get longer, or if you go from the side, it'll just distort and get wider, and it won't actually conform to the space that you and I have stretched it to. And voila, you now have a card that's filling the space that we made. And it's the correct size, 2.5 by 3.5. Okay, we're going to go ahead and complete this process by dragging it to the left. Again, using the Alt copy. Remember, like we said, Alt and drag is the same as copy. Kind of fascinating, really. Okay, and then you're basically going to repeat that for all these. I mean, to make a playset of devastating blows, which is it not funny to think about, because some of us have such a hard time getting a hold of devastating blows these days. How neat it is to think like, I'll just make my own. Well, that's not entirely fair. You guys remember sets 1 through 7. In most competition going forward, you're only allowed a small number of proxies. But like we said, 8 and forward, that's not a thing anymore, because it's a proxied set, not, like we said, a proxied, a couple cards here or there. It's not the same thing. Okay, fellas, so here's what you're going to see at this point. You're going to have, like we said, make as many as you want. You can fill up an 8.5 by 11 sheet. You can put, like we said, 9 cards in there comfortably, fitting on there, and print them 9 at a time. Especially if you're doing this at home, especially if you're doing limited numbers. This is fantastic. It lets you be able to put in, make as many cards as you want and the numbers that you want, especially if you're like some players who truly don't care about getting entire play sets of the whole thing. I am one of those weirdos who really wants to have a full play set of every card in the game. I'm sorry, every card in the set, because I really want to have those kinds of options going forward. I want to be able to make decks, and I want to always be able to have like a full playset ready to rock, because if I don't, I'll be building decks that are sort of half built, and nobody wants that. Nobody's in the mood for that. So here's what I would say about all that, about what we've been talking about, is that we would go ahead and arrange them that way. You would take, like the first card of the set, place it, in Photoshop, just like I showed you, and then you go ahead and duplicate it those 3 times, and then you'd go ahead and make, like we said, a full set of those. Oh, come on, sorry, but this one's having a hard time with this one. But like we were saying, you'd want to then go ahead and duplicate, and duplicate. Like we said, you should be able to see that on your screen now. That now I would have those more or less triple duplicatives. Kind of a funny idea, I guess. And like I said, you make a whole sheet, and this is where you sort of get not the payoff, but where you get your work usable. You could, if you're printing at home, just go to File and go to Print. Make sure to do it with a preview so you can make sure that it's scale to fit media. That's how we take that border into account, and we don't let the printer and Photoshop, just cut the edge of your cards off for fun. So here's the thing, though. What if, 2 things. What if you're like me and you have a whole heck of a bunch of cards to do, and you don't necessarily have the ability to readily do this at home? Well, that'd be kind of tough. So here's what I would go ahead and give you advice. When we started this little tutorial, I started with 8.5 by 11 because I said, well, that's going to be the one that people are going to have the most access to. What you're seeing in front of you is the exact same thing, only set up with an 11 by 17 sheet of paper. What that's for is you can get more cards printed per color sheet. For instance, I have these printed out at a local print shop. And that's what I do. I print them out this way so I get more cards per page, and then I get to print them out at a faster rate. By the way, I almost skipped the ending of this tutorial. What you're going to want to do is, if you have to package these up and take them somewhere else for printing, like we said, you're not printing from home, make sure to go to File, and then go to Save As. Pardon me, I skipped a step on you guys. Let me get back there and make sure I get a screenshot so that you guys aren't left hanging. Anything I hate more than anything is a tutorial where some joker thought it was a good idea to skip a step. Okay, so now that we're here, Like we said, it'll start off by showing you PSD as your default output. Go ahead and click that bottom drop down instead of Photoshop PSD as your output. I recommend a JPEG because the files aren't absolutely gigantic. Just a suggestion. You can print anything you want, and like we said, this is where one of the neat little factors that you and I are working on here. The JPEGs are going to print pretty clear, and because we picked 600 DPI, that just means they're going to be real sharp when they print. And then you would go ahead and click save, and then you'd want to name it like, DBZ Celestial Games Sheet 1. Just saying, because that would be real neat to go ahead and have a ordering system for these, because if you're going to print out, however many sheets it takes, I estimated, with 11 by 17, going to take like 15 sheets, somewhere thereabout. And then you just say sheet 1, and then you go ahead and hit save, and that process is done. And then you're going to go back, because like I said, if you're going to go and do the whole set like I plan to, you're going to go ahead and start deleting every one of the cards that you added on that sheet. Then you're going to go ahead and place them all back in. Again, place set of each, 3 of them at a time. And then voila, you have yourself a virtual set. You can trim that back if you want and go ahead and get less cards. Excuse me. Less cards printed if you just plain don't need them. Like me, I'm a big Namekian player, but I still dabble in everything else. So, like we said, you can make yourself as many or as few as you wish. I certainly hope that helps. Before I let you go, I suppose I have a few parting thoughts with everything we've talked about. Where do I see the game going from here? Well, if you asked me that question about a month ago, I had only vague notions and a whole lot of hope. Now that hope has been realized more than I really ever expected it to. The folks from FanZ are working with a whole lot of other folks who are still dedicated to the game, meaning fellas that even though we thought we would never see regionals again, with the fact that they still want to do, these FanZ games, for tournaments, basically like the North Kai games, they do yearly at Gen Con, all that fun stuff. I really want to keep going with this. I want to make sure that we keep our game prestigious. That's kind of a plea I have to put out there to all of you. I know a lot of us got discouraged with all of this. A lot of us find ourselves running away from the game. A lot of us, in that kind of position, wondering, are we spending our time wisely? Between me and you, I've never known a game more accessible. I've never known a game where, like, if you talk to the tabletop people, it's like one model, for any of the tabletop games, $20, $30, $100. It's not a very accessible game. Even DBZ, Panini DBZ, not particularly expensive game. We had a decent community. Get a hold of cards you really wanted to. Going forward, the limits are only what you can print. And the strategy is as deep as it could be now that you get to jump in on a game that's, like we said, this many sets in. Dare I say, we should be able to bring more people into our fold because of those things that people would think is a detriment. I call them an advantage over other games. And I'm going to go ahead and start up some real silly music about now. And I'm going to tell you guys exactly what I thought the day I heard that this game was going to continue. That my best battles are not behind me. That my greatest triumphs are just over this next hill. And that the only thing I have to do is stay steady and ready my mind and my body, and victory will come. Decked out.